Hey everyone, we're back again on this Bag C10 project, and this time we're doing some custom sheet metal work in the bed. So if you bag your pickup, you end up needing to create clearance for the rear axle, and you're left with a big hole. This is also similar if you're tubbing a car for bigger wheels and tires. A common solution is creating a notch cover. This truck actually had one, but it was done with pallet wood years ago and needs to be replaced. The overall dimensions are perfect, so we're going to remake it using sheet metal, and to add some structure and style, we'll bead roll some lines in it as well. To get started, we break the old notch cover apart and take note of the dimensions. This is designed to be removable so that the rear end can be serviced, which means we'll be creating a subframe for everything to bolt to. With our design planned, we can start cutting 1x1 bars for the subframe. We use the benchtop bandsaw because the cutting angle can be adjusted. A pro tip here is if you need to make a 90-degree angle, you can split the cut in half so both pieces of metal stock match up nicely, so two 45-degree cuts. Otherwise, you'll end up with a big gap when aligning your two pieces. With the metal stock cut and looking correct, we also cut some feet for them from 1.5-inch flat stock. This will let the subframe sit in between the ribs of the bed floor. Happy with everything, we move to final welding. My settings for the MP200i are 17.5 volts and 230 inches per minute. Just a note, make sure to clamp everything down here and be precise. I ended up getting a little movement from the bars and had to compensate for it later. With the subframe bars welded up, we do finishing touches to the feet, grinding the welds and smoothing them with glazing putty, as they'll be seen in the bed. The mini belt sander and then some hand sanding with 80 and 180 grit do the job here. I should also mention that the final version of this will be coated in bed liner, so this needs to be smooth, but not the same as if you're doing paint. Next, we can switch over to creating the actual sheet metal cover. Start by laying out all the important measurements on a fresh sheet of metal. The overall dimensions, 38 by 48 inches, mark the two bends, and lay out where the beads will go. We'll also make note of the subframe rails. This is going to get 4 vertical bead roll lines, broken by each bend, for a total of 12 beads that we need to roll. Make sure to keep any bending in mind. We added 2 inches to the top and bottom of each bend, so there's room for the sheet metal break. On something this big, you need to account for the metal warping on the bead roller. We help counter that by pre-stretching the opposite way with stretching dies. You could also use an English wheel for this. Now we can swap to the bead rolling dies. To get the right height, we make 2 passes on each line. An initial pass, and then we crank down on the adjustment knob to get the desired result. To keep all your beads the same, make note of how many turns on the knob each pass is. For us, it's contact plus 1 turn, and then contact plus 2 turns for the finished bead. While all these tools are set up, I also create a matching fuel door to replace the pallet wood one that had been there. At this point, we've created the subframe and sheet metal covering. The next step is to do mock-up and figure out mounting. We know where the subframe should sit, so we can start by mounting it to the bed, then mounting the sheet metal on top. To anchor everything, we don't have access to both sides, so standard nut and bolts are out. A great solution for this is using riv nuts. This process is pretty straightforward. Mark your holes, drill them out to the appropriate size, and secure a rivet nut in the hole so you can then bolt a piece to it. We use the 1/4 by 20 rivet nuts and zinc-plated screws to hold everything together. Now this next part is why mock-up is so important to do before finish coating your custom parts. While moving around the bed and drilling for riv nuts, it became clear that the subframe needed to have lateral support. So we added a crossbar to keep everything from moving. Then continue to mount the top to the subframe. The initial design is all together and it's looking alright. But being thin sheet metal, it needs additional support on the edges to retain its shape. This hadn't been an issue on the pallet wood version, as the wood was the structure, so we're going to add side braces before moving this thing into primer. We take some 1-inch 18-gauge angle steel and use our notch cover as a guide to mark where to make bends. Using aircraft snips, we relief cut the side and bend the brace to fit. This piece isn't going to be removable, so we're going to plug weld it to the top of the notch cover. Standard plug welds are 5/16 in diameter, which you can create by either drilling into your top sheet or with a metal hole punch. The punch is nice because it has a depth guide, so your holes are all at a consistent distance from the edge. After coating everything in weld-through primer to prevent corrosion, we clamp the brace in place and start plug welding. For plug welds, start in the center and work your way out in a circle motion. This ensures you have penetration through to the bottom sheet. Then these get ground, skim coated with glazing putty, then sanded flat with 80 grit on the Contour DSB, and the whole panel is finished with 180 grit on a DA sander. We mentioned pre-stretching early in this video, and now we can show you why. The front edge of this notch cover is oil canning and not rigid enough because the metal has been stretched too much. If we had pre-stretched a little bit more, we might have been able to prevent this. Luckily, we can use a shrinker to get some of that structure back. We mark 1-inch increments along the front edge and make several passes, being sure to hit both sides of the center evenly to try and pull the metal back together and tighten this area up. The shrinker and a little hammering get the front back to an acceptable level. And with that, we can throw this thing in the paint booth and get it into epoxy primer with our 2K Aerospray, where it will live for now until it gets bed liner coating in a few weeks. Checking this thing out, I'm pretty happy with its look over its wood pallet predecessor. The bead rolling is tasteful and still flows with the rest of the bed. The matching gas door ties it all together and should be able to take some camping chairs and a cooler rolling around back there. We covered a lot of stuff in this video, from bead rolling, welding, riv nuts, and even a little bodywork. If you want a deeper look on any of that stuff, head over to our YouTube channel for individual videos. And to pick up any of the tools you saw here, or to learn more, head over to eastwood.com.